because we feel like this is news that, although we are a smaller podcast, it's still news
could potentially be relevant.
It's very chilling news, and it's going to cause everybody to think about what this means for the future, specifically with Canada. So, a brief summary of what's going on. There is a bill, it's CA11, I think, or C11, and the bill is introducing some new laws that would regulate certain podcasts. So essentially it would be similar to broadcasting. So you know how on TV, when you're a TV channel, you have to be regulated in some way. There's certain content that you can't put on TV because of how accessible it is. I guess that's the idea. And with news channels, you can't show certain content. There are regulations involved. With podcasting, especially with content creation on YouTube, there's more of a almost anything goes kind of vibe. You can talk about pretty much anything. You might get deplatformed here and there, and there's some controversial things that people might not want to hear, but altogether you can talk more about the things you want to talk about.
Yeah, I was going to say, right now it's full expression of whatever you want to talk about and however you want to talk about it. For most
people. Some people have to, they, specifically the ones that are going to be affected by this, one of the stipulations of this is that your podcast has to be making over 10 million in revenue, not in profit. Profit, that's insane for a podcast, but in revenue. And that is a very specific type of podcast. And there aren't many people at that reach, but it's still going to dramatically affect how people interact with podcasting, specifically in Canada. And this might also incite, one of the things that I heard from people is that it might also incite a lot of the channels or a lot of the larger platforms, so like YouTube and maybe even Spotify or, the places that promote podcasts. It might even cause them to have to make some changes as well because... Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, let's clearly state
for sure
what exactly we're talking about. So basically, Canada put through a bill. I think it's called a Streaming Act now. It was B11.
Oh, interesting. B11? I thought it was C11.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
But basically, they made it so that if you are a podcaster, and it's more than just podcasts.
Yeah, it's
but
content
the reason why we're talking about it is
large.
because it's pertaining to podcasts. Yeah. But podcasts are included. And you now have to register officially through the government entity if you're making more than $10 million in revenue. And what that means is that you have to basically give certain information to them to register you. But what the fear is that this could potentially lead to overregulation and potential harms on like freedom of expression. Or censorship.
Censorship is the big, So the another part of the bill that's a little bit scary, I feel, is that they also have to give information about their listeners. So data based on who's listening to their podcast. So that can include, maybe it's specified somewhere, but in my head, that could include like email lists, just the names of people that are listening could be one thing. But also like the demographics, the type of people that listen to your podcast. And if they want to regulate a certain type of content, in general, when it comes to Canada, regulation at large is like a bit of a problem there. And they kind of have a pretty heavy hand when it comes to censorship in a lot of different ways.